We're planning for about an hour, but
Okay.
we do
good.
expect to go a little bit over. Good morning and good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Marvel Movie Talk. As always, I am Christian Bladt, and down there in the rectangle below is our friend Michael Shirley, our own Ann B. Davis, right there in the center. Michael, thank you for being here.
Always a pleasure.
And
B. Davis. I wonder how many people will recognize that reference. Well, okay.
just us, really. And
right.
The show is clearly ready to go because our friend Daniel Drew is in the chat and he's here to go. We are very excited to be joined by Kenneth Johnson, who insists we call him Kenny. And that's the only reason I call you Kenny is because you insist on it. I feel as though I don't know you well enough. But Geekscape fans know that earlier this year, you and I spoke for quite some time about the 40th anniversary of V, which you can find that on the Geekscape main audio feed and also on the Geekscape YouTube channel. But as part of that conversation, I knew we really needed to focus on V. But I basically, in public, bullied you into coming back on. I was like, well, I want to talk to you about the Hulk someday. And that day is now.
I still have the bruises, actually.
Yes. Well, I should know better than to make you angry, Kenny.
Yeah.
Think I would have learned something.
The most famous line I ever wrote. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and it shows up in the opening of every episode. That's how great it is. And we were recently watching. I was telling you before we started. We recently watched the 2008 Ed Norton Hulk, and he's trying to learn Portuguese. And he's trying to tell someone who works at a plant, he's trying to say, don't make me angry. You won't like me when I'm angry. But unfortunately, his Portuguese wasn't up to snuff. And he said, don't make me hungry. You won't like me when I'm hungry.
So, right.
But in any case, we'll talk about that line and so much more of the iconic stuff from the series. KennethJohnson.us. Let's just make sure we get that out there. That's the spot to find out more about you and some of the things that you've got going on. But in talking about this, I think it's interesting because, as we mentioned, we talked about V, and you went on to also adapt Alien Nation into a TV series. Prior to the Hulk, you had done the Bionic Woman and $6 Million Man. But in general, you were not somebody who was particularly drawn to sci-fi, superheroes, and fantasy and that sort of thing, right?
No, not particularly. I had read sci-fi when I was a kid, but I read a lot of stuff when I was a kid. And my education was at the drama department at Carnegie, what's now Carnegie Mellon University. It was Carnegie Tech then. Carnegie Mellon always sounds like something you eat with prosciutto, and I've never gotten used to that.
Well, it sounds like something you'd get at the Carnegie Deli, actually.
Yes, I'd like the Carnegie Mellon, please. But and the training I got in the drama department at Carnegie was in the theater. It was a theater school. There was no film or television at Carnegie. It was a theater school. As a matter of fact, the television, film, and particularly television, was really looked down on. We're a theater school. And so I had the great benefit of studying all the classics from the Greeks and the Romans through Shakespeare and the Restoration and all the way up to the contemporary writers of the absurdists in the late 60s and all. And so my education was really sort of a humanistic education, and rather than being focused on film. But I had the good fortune of running a film society while I was at Carnegie for 4 years, and it was handed off to me by the senior who actually introduced me to cinema. I may have talked about this before, Christian. My late friend who just died this last year, Bill Pence. Bill ran the Film Arts Society at Carnegie, which was just a one-man operation where we booked and screened classic films. And I'd been a film buff forever since a child, but Bill introduced me to the cinema and really got me steeped in the history of the cinema and classic foreign films as well as American English speaking. And I put myself through school setting up other film societies and other colleges, as a matter of fact. And Bill went on to create the Telluride Film Festival, which just celebrated its 50th anniversary. And so I've always called Bill sort of the godfather of my career. And but no, I had always envisioned an eclectic career. I would love to have had a career like Bob Wise, for example. who dabbled in many things, began as an editor, of course, and went from the Day the Earth Stood Still to West Side Story and Sound of Music and all kinds of other. He did all kinds of movies. And I always sort of saw myself as doing that. But I always warn my students at NIFA, Michael, that you got to really be careful what your first success is, because that's what they will want you to do for the rest of your life. And it's you get typecast. It was hard to believe when I first came out here, but that happens. And so I found myself being, because of the early successes on the Bionic shows and then the Incredible Hulk, being sort of pigeonholed into that realm, and it was frustrating because I would like to have done a broader range of projects, and I did manage to do a few things outside of my normal oeuvre. And I think part of the reason my stuff has been successful in speculative science fiction, whatever we call it, is because I've tried to bring it into the real world as much as possible. I've had a lot of success in taking larger than life characters and bringing them into our real world. My new novel is, which is this Sherlock Holmes, Homecoming, is about bringing the original Sherlock Holmes back into up into the 21st century, and seeing how he would fit into the 21st century, and it's been successful. I'm happy to say too. So it's I think that there's a charm in taking characters that are sort of fishes out of water, or more than they appear to be, and then making them work in the real world. I found the problems that I had with the motion picture versions of the Hulk were wanting, because I always sort of characterized. I never saw the second film. I hoped to, when I knew that Ed Norton was going to be involved, because I was a big fan of his work and his sensibilities. And they said lovely things about us at Comic-Con, and about how they were trying to make the second picture involving the Hulk be more in tune with the humanistic sense that we had tried to build into our series. And when I saw the trailer at the beginning of it, I was startled by two things. First of all, they had rebuilt a lot of sets to match stuff that I had done in the movies, which in the original pilot. And also, it really sort of felt like they were digging into the psychological problems of David Banner, as opposed to focusing on a Hulk smash. And for about the first 20 seconds of the trailer, I thought, wow, these guys might have hit the mark. And then this big green hand comes up out of the concrete, and I went, doesn't work.
Yeah.
And it was as big a disaster as the first Hulk movie was, both financially and artistically.
Well, the interesting thing about that one, though, is because as I mentioned to you, we just rewatched it recently, and then by not watching it, you might not know that you get sort of an indirect shout out. There's a military base that's referenced, Fort Johnson. They do use they use the Lonely Man theme in it, and that was very striking when I rewatched it literally just last week. That there's Ed Norton in the chair, and it's like, oh, that looks exactly like Bill Bixby in the chair, and it's a part of the flashback. So it was interesting as we watched that movie, because it felt like it was more, they said, oh, it's not a sequel, it's what we call a requel, that they kind of rebooted the Ang Lee version, but it also felt like they were doing that with the series in some ways. It's obviously much closer to the comic books.
The problem with both of them, though, falls into the way I characterize it, and maybe I've said this before to you, Christian. If you're watching a Shrek movie in 3D animation, and suddenly there's a real human being in that picture with the 3D animation, you say, no, this is wrong, this doesn't work, this doesn't fit, it doesn't make sense. Well, what they tried to do with the first two Hulk movies was take the CGI character, which was really a cartoon, as well done as it was still a cartoon, and drop it into the real world. And all the bells and buzzers went off, and in the minds of most adults, they said, that doesn't work. And that's why I think neither of them were particularly successful. As a matter of fact, rather disastrous.
Right.
It wasn't until Joss Whedon took the creature and made him a supporting player. We always called him the creature. We never called him the Hulk. But he made him a supporting player, and he was surrounded by superheroes, So he was now in a comic book world as opposed to the real world. And I think that's why the Avengers was the first of those that, to me, had really worked. I thought they did a good job.
Yeah, and I think that with Mark Ruffalo, they had found a good balance of, a Banner who has had the Hulk living in him for a while. And, I think that to me, Bill Bixby is who I think of as Banner. And the problem with Eric Bana is that he's like already a bit of a Hulk. He's already a little bit built up. And I do want to welcome our friend Eric Conner, who's here now, having just left NIFA, and now he's here. And Kenny will be at NIFA in November.
Yeah, hi Eric, how are you?
Good. I once actually was fortunate enough to do an introduction for you at NIFA. You were there prior, and I talked about how my mom used to say to me, because I would cry at the end of every Incredible Hulk episode, and she was like, "If you keep doing this, Eric, you can't keep watching this show." So I had to learn how to toughen up, because I wanted to keep watching your show, and I, my mom was fine with the tears. It was the carrying on.
Long after the end credits finished. Well, Michael, I want to kind of get your thoughts on the sort of your earliest thoughts on the Hulk. Michael is not an old man like Eric and I, and so what was were the movies where you first saw the character? Obviously, I know you've known that the show's coming up, so I know you've seen some of the show in the past. But when you first encountered the Hulk? Was it a cartoon? Was it this series in reruns? I actually don't know the answer, Michael. When you first got to see the Hulk in action?
Well, my first experience with the Hulk was definitely with my comic book cards.
Sure.
But the show, I remember seeing it randomly. You guys who watch, I'm such a huge fan of the first Captain America movie. And the Incredible Hulk show, to me, it kind of felt like it lived in that same universe. So whenever those shows would randomly come on TV, I would always try to catch them.
Yeah, Captain America was one of the ones I was offered.
Right. Yeah, and it's. So we'll bring it to that in a second. But the Incredible Hulk lives on DVD sets like the one that you actually can't see because of my green screen, but that's all right. I saw a lot of.
It's also in Blu-ray now. Right. There's a wonderful Blu-ray release, which I don't think there's anything new in the Blu-ray release, except that the picture quality is obviously ramped up a bit.
Oh, well, hold on, Kenny, that's not how you sell the Bluray. There is tons of new stuff in the Blu-ray.
You know what? There's all kinds of stuff in the Blu-ray. Actually, there's one, I was looking at it the other day, as a matter of fact. That's prompted me to bring along some photos today. There's when we were doing, and I don't know if you want to just let me jump into this.
Sure, absolutely.
Because I was going to talk a little bit about when we did the second 2-hour movie that opened the second season on the Hulk. I wanted it to be something that would be special and direct it myself. And that's when I wrote the script for Married, because the idea of, I was always fascinated with the idea of having a woman get in bed with Bill Bixby and wake up with the Hulk and sing "Ah, Sweet Mystery of Life," So it sort of started there, but also I had a friend who was a psychologist, a doctor, and he'd been doing research in using hypnotherapy to treat diseases, to treat cancer. And I don't mean to just help with the pain of cancer, I mean to treat it aggressively, where he would put people under hypnosis and he would have them visualize and have visual images of like a wagon train that's surrounded by attacking savages. This represents the cancer, and the people on the inside represent their own body and how you have to fight off the attackers. And he would take patients through this under hypnosis, where they were really fighting back physically in their heads against the invaders. And I thought, that's such a cool opportunity for me to get inside Banner's head and have my two leading players in the frame at the same time, so that we could really have a hypnotic experience, hopefully in every sense of the word. But part of the reason part of the need to, when I set that idea up for myself, I knew that I needed an area where they could meet. And the first thought that came to mind was the first Star Wars movie where C-3PO and R2 dropped down on that desert landscape with the sand dunes and all. And I thought, yeah, something like that would be good. And we searched, and we finally found a place called Brawley. It's just north of the Mexican border at the end of the southern part of California, which is a state park, which looks like the Sahara. I was startled to see it. So I've got a couple of shots from that I wanted to tell you about, because when we got there to film, my location manager, Ed Jeffers, came up to me all in a flap, and he said, "Kenny, we've got a big problem because there's a man here that's saying it's his land and we can't film here." And I said, "What are you talking about? It's a state park, Ed." And he said, "Yeah, but could you just come talk to him?" I said, "Ed, you're the location manager. Just work it out." And he said, "Well, no, I think if you could just talk to him for a minute or two." So that's can I bring up the photo here? How do we try this?
Yeah, click on
present.
And then there should be the lower button down there.
Let's try that.
And share screen.
And I've got to go to here, and then I've got to go to there.
Yeah.
And go to there. How about that? You see
and
it?
Look at that. And there is
this,
indeed your photo. Yes.
There you go. Okay. Well, this is Ed Jeffers, and this is me. You can see I am not happy. This is John McPherson walking along patiently behind us, and Jeff is saying, Ed is saying, just come, Kenny, just come down and meet the guy, will you? And I'm grumbling, and okay, we get up to the edge of where the sand starts, and I see coming toward me this Arab guy with a scimitar riding a donkey that's being led along. And I'm going, what the hell am I looking at? And he's yelling, "Get off my land, get off my land." And as he gets closer, I begin to realize it's Bob Steinhauer, my line producer. And I start cracking up, as you see. And everybody knew about it but me, right? And this is me bowing down to welcome the Ayatollah Steinhauer, as we called him. And Bob just wanted to do something that would sort of get everybody off with a laugh. We knew it was going to be a difficult 2 days here because the temperature was 125 degrees and the temperature of the sand was 150 degrees. So he wanted us to start with a laugh, and so we did. This is the Hulkhead that I was talking to you about before we started. This is the original that Werner Kepler made for us as we were trying to figure out what the creature should look like. You'll notice how nifty the hair is, It's we never could make that work. And I later realized that the problem was that what we should have done was shaved Louis's head, because Lou had big Italian hair, and to try to get it squashed down enough to be able to get that in, it just wouldn't work. And so 30, 40 years later, I finally figured out the way to do it, and it would have been better for us if we'd gone that way. But too late, unfortunately.
I want to kind of backtrack to the notion of you taking on the project. You referenced the fact that they approached, I guess Universal had optioned or licensed a few Marvel characters, and they came to you to see what you'd be interested in. And I guess you initially weren't interested. What was it that made you kind of come back and think, oh, I know how the Hulk works if I can do it the way I want to, Kenny?
Well, I think this story's been told a million times, so I will condense it to the absolute essence. I just didn't want to get involved with spandex and primary colors. And the Incredible Hulk was just even worse. But I was actually trying to figure out how to say no to Frank Price, who's the president of Universal at the time. But I was in a good spot because I had done The Bionic Woman, which was a huge hit at that point, and as well as the $6 Million Man. And I was reading a book that my wife Susie had given me by Victor Hugo called Les Miserables, and I had not read it until that time. Susie read it when she was 18. That's my wife, you know. And I had Jean Valjean and the fugitive concept in my head, and Inspector Javert, you know, pursuing him. And I thought, okay, well, maybe there's a way to take a little bit of Victor Hugo and add a little Robert Louis Stevenson's Dr. Jekyll and this ludicrous thing called The Incredible Hulk. And I went back to Frank and said, okay, look, here's what I do. I can do it as an adult psychological drama that's really based on Greek tragedy, where the hero brings down onto his own head the curse. Because when you start messing with things better left to the gods don't like that, and they say, "Watch this," and he's struck. So that's what it was. So rather than going through the comic book origins of the Hulk, which was something about a gamma ray, he was too close to a gamma bomb going off. Okay, I said, let's do it more realistically and build it off of a man's obsession with trying to find out why he didn't have the strength to turn over and rescue his wife, turn over the car that his wife was trapped inside and burned to death. And yet other people have been able to accomplish that kind of thing. So that's where we got into the Dr. David Banner, physician scientist looking for a way to tap into the strengths that all humans have, yada, yada. And Frank agreed to let me do it, said, agreed that it would be my casting, that they wouldn't shove some actor down my throat that I didn't want. And I said, okay, I'll do it. And I want something in return. We agreed I was going to do a big miniseries based on Sir Walter Scott's Ivanhoe, set in the 1200s with Robin Hood as a supporting player. Great piece of work that had never been done well cinematically. So I was just eager to get the Hulk behind me and move on. The pilot 2-hour movie for the Hulk was written in 7 days. And on one of those days, I wrote 43 pages of script in 1 day. Never beat that record. And the telling thing is that, you know, normally scripts have a lot of different color pages because so many people have notes and they get to make changes and yada, yada, yada. We shot the white pages of my first draft script. And that's, you know, and I immediately then started working on Ivanhoe, which of course never got made because by the time I was ready to do it, Frank Price had left the studio and the hand that had shook mine was not there to sign the check. And that's how I fell into the Hulk. And Bill Bixby was the first person and the only person I sent it to. I had seen him in a television play called Steam Bath in '73. It's still available on DVD, and it's a killer. And I watched this actor whom I just knew occasionally, not personally very well, but I saw him go through every emotion that I could ever imagine needing, in a drama in 90 minutes. And
just to interject quickly, Kenny, that sort of answers my question about Bill Bixby, was because prior to this, you know, he was very well established from My Favorite Martian, Courtship of Eddie's Father, and I think mostly he was thought of as a comedic actor. But see, there's that missing link was the play you saw him in. And I think it's interesting that he was the only actor. You know, so as you were writing it, was it like, oh, this is Bill Bixby?
Yeah, that's what it was. He was the guy because he was a big television star, and I wanted that. I wanted people to say, oh, if Bill Bixby's interested enough to get involved with this thing, it couldn't be a complete bag of shit. And Bill's. Paul Braden was Bill's agent and gave Bill the script, and Bill said, I don't want to even read a script called The Hulk. And his agent Paul said, yes, you do. And Bill read it and called me and said, can I come talk to you? And I said, sure, come on over. And he came up to my office at Universal, and Bill never just walked into a room. I mean, when Bill came into a room, there was a presence that came into the room with him, and it was it was huge. And he says, this is what we're really going to do. It's going to be a human drama. I'm going to suffer as torture. And I said, yes, actors love to suffer. P.S. And we made our bargain, and we went forward. And I never regretted it. And we had a great relationship for the whole time we did it, and until I talked to him, like I think the day before, 2 days before he died. We were really, really close friends.
Yeah. passed away in the early '90s, from my understanding, and that's great to know that because look, you work for a long time on a show with anyone, and especially the amount of screen time that Bill had in every episode.
Right.
There could be a chance that at the end of 5 years, he wasn't that interested in talking to you. So that's a testament.
Or that interested in doing the show or whatever.
Yeah.
No, we were there, and we had a lot of knockdown, drag out arguments, but they were never about bullshit. They were always about real stuff, about this line or that line or this character or that nuance. And Bill was there and on the set and knew his lines and showed up and was a professional. And when we went to look for to do Married and have thinking about who would Bill marry, we looked at a lot of film of a lot of different actresses and settled ultimately on Mariette Hartley, who had just done a remake of African Queen, not playing the Bogart role, Warren Oates, I think, was trying to do Bogart, and the movie was, well, you can't do Bogart and her and Hepburn, but Mariette was wonderful, and she had that weight and the presence as an actress. And incidentally, the same story happened with her. Her agent gave her the script and said, "You should take a look at this." And Mariette said, "Oh, I really don't want to do an Incredible Hulk." And her agent said, "This is your Emmy." And Mariette said, "Really?" And it became her Emmy. She won the Emmy for Best Actress in a Drama Series that year. And was, it was terrific. I have some photos of her. That's Susan Sullivan there.
Oh my gosh! Sorry.
Yeah, yeah.
That's what happens when I do. That's a problem when I Google while we're actually.
She didn't last very long, unfortunately. Though she was great too.
I know. Yeah.
But I got to tell you that Susan Sullivan was key to making the pilot successful, because she was our eyes in the room, and she was the reality that had to. And she was extraordinary. And when I see it nowadays, I'm aware that of the import and the impact that she had. But just to come back to Married for a second, here's this is the desert where we were filming. This is one of the shots that we got up in Brawley, so it's this surreal kind of landscape. But it gave me, and here we are further away. This is where where that shot was taken from. We were that far away, and as I said, the sand temperature was 150 degrees, so we had to protect Lou's feet when he was out there. And the other problem was that it was so hot that his makeup, the green makeup, was separating into the primary colors of blue and yellow. So when he stood around waiting to go on, he would get hot, and the makeup, suddenly we had a blue and yellow Hulk. And just before we go out to get the shots, the team had to rub him down to get it green again so that he could go out. But it gave me the opportunity to get shots like these, where I've got my hero and Bill and Lou in the scene at the same time, and you get the feeling here of the confrontation of Banner with his demon on the inside, and trying to keep him in a cage, and trying various methods to try to close him in. And this is the moment that I told you I'd always sort of fantasized about, Mariette being in bed with Bixby, and her suddenly something's happening that she was not expecting. And again, Mariette brought the reality to it, and was so powerful in her performance that it really helped to bring the audience into the unreality of having scenes with a big green guy. This is the scene where they in Married, where he proposes to her. So they've been down walking on the beach, and it was a very touching scene. We didn't do it actually at the beach because it was too noisy at the water, so we got the close-ups of them up here. And this is me sort of helping her through it. And this next shot, this is the one that Mariette calls her Emmy picture, because that's how our relationship was as we worked through and tried to figure out what the character was, exactly how she was going to play it. So it was a wonderful experience. And it was funny, Mariette had just given birth 2 weeks before that to Justine, her daughter. And the very first day of filming was the scene at this bar where she's getting drunk because she's dying. and getting picked up by the wrong people. And she had the silk blouse on, and we had to keep changing her silk blouse because she would hear Justine crying off stage, and she would start lactating, and suddenly there were. So we went through, I think, about a half a dozen silk shirts that day, and she was embarrassed. And we said, "What are you embarrassed about? You just had a baby. Of course this is going to happen. Don't worry about it." And she was great, and she was there through thick and thin, and we had really a wonderful time bringing the characters to life, and again, as I said, she was really part of the reason that Married was so successful. It, as a matter of fact, my pilot was released in Europe as a theatrical feature, and became. They got a call from Universal one day, and they said, "Hey, congratulations!" I said, "What?" So they said, "You have the top grossing movie in Europe." I said, "Have you got the right number?" I said, "Yeah. We released your pilot as a theatrical feature in Europe, and for like 2 months, it was the top grossing movie, and and made a pot full of money for Universal. I think it was at the time it made about $18 or $19 million overseas, which was in 1978. That was huge, And I got a check one day from Universal Residual. I said, "This is a weird check. What is this?" And I called them up and I said, "What's this check for?" And they said, "Oh, that's your profit participation as a writer for the pilot, for the movie that we released in Europe." I said, "Oh, cool. This is my share of the 17 million." And they said, "Yeah." And they said, and the check was for $6.71.
But back then that was like $19.
That's right. Nowadays, yeah. But actually, that was just my writer's check. I did get my director's residual. My part of the foreign theatrical release for directing was $3.25. So I almost made $10 on the deal.
Well,
welcome to studio bookkeeping.
In those days, you could have gotten 2 cups of coffee for that.
Barely. If I drank coffee, which in those days I didn't.
In case anyone wonders why there was 2 strikes this year.
In the industry for those residuals. Yes. Well, we have a similar problem where most shows, Eric changes his shirt 3 or 4 times. It's not quite the same problem. I want to stick on Banner for a moment, and I want to go back to Michael, and I will get to some of these questions in the chat. There's some great questions from our audience. But Michael, I wanted to kind of focus on whichever iteration of the Hulk, but specifically for this one, the separation, the importance of the character of Banner, you can only earn what the Hulk or the creature goes around and does if we're interested in watching Banner. And I believe that was a big problem for you with the second Hulk movie, was you just got tired of looking at Ed Norton. But talk about the importance of Banner and sort of specifically, watching Bill Bixby as Banner in the series.
Well,
I just wanted Michael to jump in real quick.
Okay,
but then I'll certainly get your thoughts. Yeah.
I found it such a huge connect when we were talking last week about the movie with Edward Norton. I felt like these are just like 2 completely different characters that have nothing to do with each other. And I feel like you definitely don't get that in the original Hulk TV series. They very much feel connected. Almost too connected, maybe even. The character is so kind of like tortured by all of this, where I don't really find in maybe Mark Ruffalo's version, but I didn't really find as much. A little bit with Eric Bana,
right.
A little bit, but with Edward Norton, the character just felt so disconnected. And when you were doing all of this, were Bill Bixby and Lou Ferrigno spending a lot of time together? Because it seems like they're really kind of in sync with this character in the role.
Well, they spent some time together, but not a whole lot, because generally, when we had shot Bill's sequences and the eyes turned white, it was take the rest of the day off, Bill, and hello, Louie. And because of that, that's one of the reasons I wanted to do Married, and through hypnosis put them in the same sequence in the same time. And so Bill, I think, and Jack Colvin also were very helpful to Lou in giving him ideas and thoughts about acting. And he watched certainly a lot of what they did, because he would be there before they were gone, obviously, because he would be getting the makeup on, which takes forever. So I think Bill and Jack both really helped Lou to develop his professional sense of acting. And Lou really worked and grew as the stories went along. And some of my favorite scenes in our series were after he'd had his torment and hulked out. And there's a whole list, incidentally, of the reasons that David Banner hulked out on my website that Kevin Koster, who was an assistant director that we worked with, Kevin listed all of them, and some of them you go back and look and they're pretty funny. But that was what I was looking for, to have different reasons rather than just getting beat up all the time. But on the way coming down from that anger and coming down from Hulk smash, more and more we enjoyed playing with the sort of innocent, childlike character, and Louis really got into playing that well, where he would be able to play scenes where somebody's teaching him how to open a soda can, that kind of thing. Smaller stuff and more human kind of stuff, like a person who was somewhat mentally disabled.
That's probably one of my favorite episodes, with the guy in the sports car and the carbon monoxide poisoning.
No, it's very sweet, and it gave us a way to broaden the time with Lou too, and get him to do more. And you've probably heard me say this either here or elsewhere, but Lou used to say to me, "Kenny, why doesn't the Incredible Hulk have more dialogue?" And I said, "Well, Louis, for starters, he didn't grow up on Flatbush Avenue in Brooklyn." And I took him when we were doing the first, well, actually, I think it was the first episode we did. I went to Frank Price and said, "Look, I really got to plant this creature in the real world. And the realest world I can think of is Times Square." And I said, "I want to take Lou back and run him through Times Square, partly just to see if anybody would notice," and which they did. So we went back in March of '78. It was cold, and we ran Lou right down Broadway into Times Square. And a lot of people did watch. It was great, because of course they would if they saw a big green guy running in. But the fun part for me was that we had a trailer there for Lou to get the makeup and all, and his family came over from Brooklyn. And you walked into the trailer and it was, "Hey, Louie, hey, Vinny, hey, Tony, how you doing, man? He says to Cecilia, come on over here." And they're all talking like Louie does, they're all Brooklyn. And it was really, really delicious. We had a great time.
I was just going to say, my wife just reminded me that her grandparents grew up across the street from Lou Ferrigno. Or not grew up, but like lived across the street from him in Brooklyn. So yeah, he was definitely a hometown hero.
Well, he sure was, and also it's interesting because Louis was went deaf when he was about 6 years old from fever, and he had huge hearing aids, and he was really very, very deaf. So like so many people who are deaf, he can't hear himself, obviously, either. And that aggravated and made more difficult people understanding him. When we were first working together, it was sometimes really hard to understand him when he was talking. But he has worked through that so magnificently in all the years since, and has become a spokesperson for the Sheriff's Department here in Los Angeles. And he does a lot of speaking for kids who have one disability or another, to show them you can do it. I did it, you can do it. And I always heap praise on him for taking the time to share and to show folks, and particularly young people, what you can do. You don't have to let it hold you back, anything.
Yeah, and specifically as it relates to Lou, I wanted to kind of circle back as to how me personally, I was able to watch the Incredible Hulk in reruns and not be terrified was because of a very specific visit from a neighbor, Mr. Rogers, showing us that Lou Ferrigno is just a guy who puts on green makeup. And then I forget how old I was, but I was like preschool age. And then it's like, oh, okay, I kind of get it. And he, Mr. Rogers did something similar with the Wicked Witch of the West in the 70s. So it's such a smart, simple thing. But then in just looking for that, I found this great picture that our video audience can see of there's Fred Rogers, Bill Bixby, Lou Ferrigno in character. And I'll let the audience decide which one of them has the most intense eyebrows, but it's neither of the ones you worked with. But and Lou just seems to have had this presence, and clearly people love him. Decades later, both of the Hulk movies he has a cameo in. I think he has lines in both of them. He plays a security guard in both of them. But and I think it's a nod that's important to people. And I know that there's been some conversation in the past about the casting of him, but I think it's important to explain how you arrived at Lou Ferrigno, this bodybuilder who, for all intents and purposes, I don't think any human could have looked more like the Hulk. Sure, now we've got CGI Hulk, we can have a cartoon Hulk, but if you were going to have a person painted green, he must have been exactly what you were looking for, Kenny.
Well, yeah, ultimately that's true. What happened was Lou was one of the first people that read for me because I started looking for that. But when I realized I was talking to a 24-year-old kid who had never done any acting at all, was very hard of hearing, and had never acted in anything, I was concerned about that because I really wanted an actor that I could place scenes with. We originally cast Richard Kiel, who went on to be Jaws in the Bond movies, and was also in Wild Wild West with my good friend Michael Dunn, the little person. And Richard Dick Kiel was really an actor, but we shot about a week's worth of film, and we just got the feeling it just didn't look right, and it didn't feel right, and he really needed to have more of the physique. So I brought Lou back. And it's not like I could audition him by reading a scene because Hulk not talk because Kenny decided Hulk talk sound dumb, and Stan really got on board with that too.
I'll just interject and explain that for our audience. It was something I was going to bring up. It is that Stan Lee, of course, co-creator of the Hulk, he loved your version of it, and I was reading an interview where he said like, "Oh yeah, that probably is better that he doesn't talk." But by that point in the comics, it had been established that he would talk about Puny Banner and mostly just Hulk smash. So it seems like a much better way to do it. So sorry, just to get back to it though, you had to audition him, but there was no dialogue to read.
No. So I said, okay, here's what we're going to do, Lou. We're going to do the very end of the movie in my office, where Susan Sullivan is going to die in your arms. So I got down on the floor and I said, come on, Lou, get down and let me put my head in your lap. And so when I'm going through my dying stuff and trying to see if I can get some emotion out of him, and he was fine. He really pumped it up and came up to it. And when we were filming it, Susan was so wonderful with him and going through it and giving all of her full-throated performance of death. And Lou really got to the point where he literally had tears in his eyes and got to the moment that was so powerful when she dies in his arms. As Marriott Hartley does in Married, at the end of Married, in a whole separate kind of way. And so it came together, and Lou developed really well, and we're still really good pals and friends today. And he's still pumped up. And the other thing that people don't realize too is that you're shooting an episodic television series. It's grueling on an actor. Okay, now imagine yourself being the actor that also has to get to an hour and a half of makeup on either end of the day, and imagine yourself being the same actor who's got to keep himself pumped up by going to the gym 4 hours a day. And Louis had a full-time job and really had to work to keep himself as pumped up as he needed to be to fulfill everybody's image of what the Hulk should be.
Yeah, he strikes me as somebody who couldn't have too many cheat days. You know, the camera was very unforgiving.
No, but one of the shots I have to bring you, we can talk about it. But one of the tricky parts we had was finding a stunt double for Louis, because how many people look like Louis,
Yeah.
and ultimately we found a wonderful guy named Manny Perry. Manny is a bodybuilder like Lou, but the difference is between them are Manny's not quite as big as Lou, and also, see if I can get to it here. Yeah, here it is. Also, Manny, who has since gone on to become a director himself, and stunt coordinator and all of that. Here they are. Hank, boink, boink, boink. This is Manny Perry. Manny is black.
Oh.
But you don't know it when you put green makeup on him. But it always sort of amused me, So here's and you can see their physiques are pretty similar. I mean, nobody's the size of Lou, but Manny has got the same basic body build, and wonderful human being, and just the greatest guy to work with. And he was with us through the whole series. This is Frank Orsatti in the middle. The two guys are holding up Frank, who was Bill Bixby's longtime stunt double and our stunt coordinator on the series. And Frank went on to direct for us too. I gave him some directing shots as the series went on, just as Jack Colvin had some too. But yeah, I love the fact that underneath that green skin, the Hulk was a black guy, and it really made me smile.
Well, one of the things you were talking about was, filming in the elements, and how, the makeup could separate, or it could run, or, it's, you could accidentally see a white spot if it's not reapplied. I wanted to go back to the Times Square episode, because I did watch that in the past week, and there's a scene that our visual audience can see, and Lou is running up Park Avenue, and there's snow everywhere, and of course he's barefoot, and he's barely got a shirt on. So he really went through the ringer more than most actors usually do, I guess, when you would shoot on location, right, Kenny?
Oh yeah, and we had little green feet made for him that you can still see in a lot of the shots, particularly nowadays in high def. But it was challenging, obviously, to what we put him through. But again, this really helped to put him into the real world, and that was the whole point of going to New York, and having that reality that the whole world was familiar with, and seeing him in the midst of it. And I had like 3 cameras running. One was up on the top of Times Square, the where the big ball goes down on New Year's Eve, looking down at him at 45th and Broadway, right in the heart of Times Square, and a couple of other cameras on the street. Of course, we were working with the police to control traffic. And I got to tell you too, guys, one of the biggest rushes you can get as a director is to have a walkie-talkie in your hand and just quietly say, "Hold the traffic in Times Square, please." It's like, well, okay, it was great. Or at one point that we were shooting, there was not enough traffic, and the TCA officer that I was working with said, "You want more traffic?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Okay, hang on a second." He said, "Okay, hold the traffic down at 50, 58, 59. And they held the traffic for like 2 or 3 stops. People held at a red light with cops saying, "No, you can't go through." And then finally they let them all through, and it was like a herd, a huge herd of cars coming through right when we needed them. It was cool.
Yeah, and I think that the importance of putting him in the real world goes a long way. Of the episodes I watched and rewatched recently, this one stands up, and the Hulk breaks Las Vegas, because first of all, I'm seeing 70s Vegas, which I have never seen with my own eyes. So it was kind of fun to see all that, to actually be out there on some of those locations. I think it adds to the realism, instead of a lot of locations are clearly, sets and sometimes practical locations in California. But when you're recognizable landmarks, I think it adds a lot to it, Kenny.
Yeah, well, all those, I don't want to burst your bubble here. All those landmark shots were stock footage. We never took the show to Vegas. We shot it locally, and the only time we went anywhere else was for this the jump to New York for one day of filming in the street of Manhattan. And when we went to Brawley for 3 days, we were down there for 2 days, but all the rest of the shows were shot in Los Angeles and using stock footage to say, okay, here we are in Las Vegas.
Okay, I'm not going to ask you any questions about Santa Claus. I don't think I want to hear the answer. Eric, I want to give you a chance to share some of your thoughts. I know that you watched a number of episodes, in the last week, some that I didn't watch. So I don't even know what you'd like to ask Kenny about, but I wanted to give you the opportunity, Eric.
Sure. Kenny, you were talking about like Lou Ferrigno's like performance, and that was something that was really kind of fun for me watching it now. And it's been, gosh, I'm not sure how many years since I like literally sat down and watched an episode beginning to end. And I was really struck by his performance because it was like silent cinema almost. So much of his physicality, I thought was like it wasn't just a muscular guy. Like there's so much more going on in his performance than I think definitely a younger me would have noticed. But I think that's something in terms of grounding it. I think that word kind of kept coming to mind as I'm watching a whole bunch of these episodes from across the seasons is, Bill Bixby as a performer, the way he could work with so many different types of actors. A bunch of years ago, I got to interview Ed Begley Jr., and I talked about how he's like a wonderful dance partner in a scene. And I thought like that's a quality Bill Bixby had so well is he would be with children, adults, people with a variety of sort of personalities. And I think when I was watching it now, I appreciated like how hard that can be on an actor. It's like he's not acting with the same cast week in, week out. Rather, it is a series, obviously there's a couple of recurring characters, but mostly it's a series of guest stars. And I was just kind of curious for yourself as a writer and a director on this, what was it like for you then where almost every episode is a whole new world build, a whole new, like The Fugitive, right? It's like he's somewhere else. Oh, I'm sorry, Kenny, you're muted.
Oh, I'm not. No, I'm not.
No,
you're not. Now you're not.
I was trying to cut down on the echo.
I'm sorry. See, Christian.
Thanks for pulling back the curtain, Eric.
Christian's playing God here, Kenny, like you did with Times Square. This is Christian's Times Square. He runs it all. But I'm sorry. I was wondering if you could talk about what it's like every episode. You had to do a whole new world, basically.
Well, yeah. I mean, and Bix, the only time he ever worked with one of the continuing characters was when he would have scenes with Jack Colvin, who was either blindfolded or Bixby's face was covered. And certainly he never got to work with Lou, except this one time when we did the Married piece. But first of all, Bix was just a consummate good professional actor, and we would have casting sessions to fill out the rest of the cast, and we'd go to people that we knew and had worked with before. Gerald McCraney, we wrote several scripts, particularly for Mackie, because we loved him as an actor so much. This was before he had done Simon and Simon. He was just a contract player at the studio, as was Jack Colvin. As was Lindsay Wagner when we did the original Bionic Woman. So the casting people would just bring in people that they thought would be good for the each particular role on each particular episode, and we would try to write characters that would be interesting for actors to play, obviously. And the thing was, we were always trying to say, well, what makes this a Hulk episode? And it was. To us, the overall theme of the Incredible Hulk as a series was self-control, and struggling with the enemy within, the demons that lurked inside you, and what were the trigger points for those things. And in the case of that Banner, of course, it was anger. But we realized the Hulk could manifest itself in different ways in different people. With some people, it could be greed, or it could be obsession, or it could be jealousy, or it could be drugs, obviously, or alcohol, or that sort of thing. So we were always trying to find that thematic thread and the trouble that the people would be in whom Bix would encounter. That he, as a physician, which is why I made him a physician, would have more sort of access to, and help them through the problems that he would find when he suddenly fell into their life. And there were basically two kinds of episodes. The one kind would be where he's on the road on his way to trying to find a particular cure. And so therefore he's working as a ranch hand or in a brewery or whatever. And something is going on there that becomes a melodrama. And the other type of episode is where he had gotten to someone who might be able to help him. The is there a cure here episodes. And we had several of those like that where he would be really focused in on trying to make it go away. Interesting that the psychological underpinning of the whole series is to bring the series to an end, for Banner to cure himself. And we never got to play that out. I had always envisioned eventually bringing it to a conclusion that was satisfactorily psychologically for the audiences as well as for Dr. Banner. But we were canceled by an idiot summarily, and we had already 6 shows in the can, and none of them were a final episode, or we hadn't even really thought about how we were going to do it. But we just knew that eventually we would probably try to find a way of having some closure. But we never got there. But no, Bix welcomed the new casts and was a wonderful collaborator and a real helpmate to all of the people that came in, no matter what age they were. And it was just a great professional company.
One of the things I wanted to touch on briefly is that you talked about, yes, the show ends unceremoniously. And then a few years later, there's a series of sort of sequel movies with Bill Bixby, Lou Ferrigno, Jack Colvin's in one of them. But you are not involved in those. Were you not approached, or what happened to that?
No, I was. In fact, I was up in. It was odd, and I never quite understood it quite clearly. But I think I do. I was in Toronto filming Short Circuit 2, directing that. And I went to see my dailies one night, and in the screening room next to me was Robert Harris, who then was head of Universal TV, and a good friend, old friend. As a matter of fact, Robert, when I first took the gig, when we first went to series on the Hulk, Robert asked me, would you mind, could you do me a favor, Kenny? I said, what? Sure, Robert, what? He said, well, my sister, Karen, and her writing partner, they've really just started, but could they pitch an idea to you? And I said, well, sure, I can't say it, I'll buy it necessarily. He said, no, just give them a chance to see what it's like. So Karen and Jill came in and pitched the story. It was a really good story. And I said, yeah, okay, we'll make a deal. You go ahead, write the story. If we like it, we'll send you the script, which they wrote it. It was pretty well written. We had some changes and fixes, and then we went to script, and they wrote the script, and the script came in, and it just wasn't right for all kinds of reasons, and we were in a pinch, and I had to get it made quickly. So rather than have them do the rewrite and me try to explain to them, I just did the rewrite because we had to get it shot. The Universal ethos is we don't want it good, we want it Thursday. And our challenge is always to do it Thursday, but also to do it as good as we could. So in many cases, we were forced, the Jim Harriet or myself, to just do a rewrite. So I did a rewrite. And then I brought Karen and Jill in and said, okay, look, we're going to go through your script, and I'm going to show you what I did and why I did it. And I explained it to them, and they understood. And so it was a great learning experience for them. And I thought, good, I did my good deed and like that. And about a week later, Karen called back and said, we have another idea. And I went, oh, okay. Sure, come on in. So they came in, it was a really good idea. And they wrote the story, and it was a really good story. And then they wrote the script, and it was a really good script. And so almost immediately we hired them to be story editors on the series. And the next year I bumped them up to executive story consultant so that they get a little more money. And the year after that, they were producing the series for me. So it was a great story. Anyway, there I am in Toronto. I run into Robert Harris, and he said, "Oh yeah, we just finished doing the Hulk movies." I said, "What Hulk movies?" He said, "Well, Bix came to them along with Nick Correa, who had been one of my producers, that I gave a lot of room to run in when he was working with me, because he was really talented as both a writer and also as a director. And Bix wanted to direct it as well. And I guess they sort of got together and said, well, shouldn't we call Kenny? But they never did, just to let me know. Nobody even called to let me know, which I thought was really odd. And I never broached it with Bill. I just sort of let it go by. And because it didn't matter. I was busy doing other things. I couldn't have done it even if they had asked me. And I never have seen them. I've heard reports from people who have said that they were not quite the quality that they were used to in the series. And when I saw that Thor was in one of them, I said, okay.
Yeah, that's what I was going to reference, is that Thor and Daredevil show up in one. And that was like the third one, I think. And I was like, I don't know, 12, 13 at that point. And even I was like, even I don't like this. Like, I should like this, right? But I don't.
One was like a courtroom drama or something, right? Wasn't
well, it's the trial of the Incredible Hulk, and
right.
Stan Lee was a juror. So that's why that stands out for that reason. But yeah, it's different because it was like you were clearly, I think that, having talked to you about V and about this, you were telling grounded real world stories with fantastical, unexplainable elements within it, but everything else around it works. And I think that's why Bill Bixby works so well, because there's never an instant where it's like, oh, I'm playing this for a laugh. He really has this problem. He has all that pain in his life. And yes, when he gets angry, he turns into a big green creature. But then when he's back, he's still got all the same real world problems to deal with. And
including his torn shirts. I did write him a couple. I think it was in the Trucker episode where he said, I got to get some shirts that stretch. So occasionally we would have a laugh about it, but yeah, it was when you're dealing with. Maybe I told you this once before, Christian, but years ago many years ago now, I had the opportunity to work with George Burns, great American comedian, and George was great at storytelling. He could just get there and grab you and pull you in. And I asked him if he had a formula, and he said, yeah. He said, I do, Kenny. He said, whenever you're telling a lie story, you got to put as much truth in it as you can. So that way you can say, okay, well, you heard about this, right? Oh, yes, the audience says. Well, and this you've seen, right? Oh, yeah, okay. Well, yeah, have you seen this? Oh, no, but that makes sense based on everything else that I have seen, And so that's what I tried to do in all of the stuff that I've done where I'm dealing with larger than life situations, whether it's V or Bionic Woman or The Incredible Hulk or Alien Nation, is to make them as realistic and truthful as I can, so that the audience gets on board, particularly the adult audience, particularly the female adult audience, which oddly enough has always been my largest share of audience in everything that I have done, from $6 Million Man through Bionic, through Hulk, through V, through Alien Nation. My largest share of the audience is always adult women. And it's not because I set out to sort of, well, how can I write so that women will like this stuff? I just write what feels right to me. And that's, fortunately, my sensibilities, I guess, have been enough to drag along a lot of female viewers, which is really, really satisfying.
Well, yeah, and I think with the Hulk, it helps that it's a show where there's a perfect specimen of male physique, shirtless for most of the episode, and I think it's like, oh, I'll make sure I tune in again next week. I think the reason people, particularly women, tuned in the show. Yes, some were coming to look at Lou's body, no question about that. But it was Bix that carried the show in terms of the emotional content and the drama, and I've had thousands of emails come in from people who say something to the effect of, I wish I could be driving along and see him hitchhiking on the side of the road so I could pick him up.
And that's what we wanted. That's what I wanted everybody to feel.
Look, he's got that quality where, in an episode, it'll be established that he's been around for 3 weeks and, so some girl in her late 20s already loves him, and I'm like, yeah, he just brings that to the table. There's a couple more things I want to ask you about. I know we're already past an hour, but we'll try to wrap it up soon. But I did want to get a couple of these questions in because they were asked a while ago. Kame Egan, did you ever consider going back to Hulk as gray instead of green for the show? When he was first introduced in comics, he was gray, but fairly quickly thereafter, they realized green popped more. Did you ever have any thoughts of having him be a color other than green?
Of course, that was the argument that I did lose with Stan, because I changed his name. I wanted to change his name from Bruce Banner to David Banner, so it wouldn't be alliterative. I was trying to avoid the Lex Luthor, Lois Lane, Clark Kent, Peter Parker alliteration that is one of the landmarks of comic books. The other thing I said was, Stan, what is he? The envious Hulk? The jealous Hulk? Why is he green, Stan? The color of rage is red. You get flushed with anger. It's. And Stan said, well, it used to be gray, as you pointed out. And then the printer, not the publisher, but the printer came to me and said, we think we can do a pretty consistent green. How would that be for this one? And Stan said, sure. And I went, oh, Stan. It's not organic. It doesn't make sense. It's not a human color. And now I understand that the Red Hulk has shown up in later years. So no, we were stuck with green. And the biggest problem with green was that there was no green makeup when we just started the show, because they did not make any pancake makeup, which is what we use in filming. The only green makeup we could get was grease paint, which had to be imported from Germany. And grease paint rubs off on everything. So it was like when we were doing the second TV movie with Laurie Prang, who was in a pajama outfit as Lou was carrying her through this swamp. There were days we had to stop filming because we had gone through 24 pairs of pajamas for Laurie, and we didn't have any that weren't green. And so by the time we got to the series, we gotten somebody to develop pancake makeup for us that was green and was a lot easier to put on and take off, and it didn't just rub off on you. I still have sweatshirts upstairs at my office here that have smudges on the shoulder where I bump shoulders with Louie.
Well, Kame Egan, who asked that question, the episode you're referencing, I believe, is called Death in the Family. And that was one that she referenced when we talked about how we were going to do this, because in it, the Hulk does square off with the bear and he tosses a rattlesnake. Those were the ones that she remembered from, watching it as a kid. And, the show needs to work on the adult level. But obviously, some of us watching it as kids, it was like, okay, the guy in the denim shirt has some problems. Okay, all right, I'm kind of paying attention. Okay, here's the Hulk. Now I want to see what happens.
Right. Well, the bear was a story too, because when I wrote this second, the order from CBS was a Genesis pilot and a second TV movie that showed how it could work as a series. In which case Bill was working at a ranch, and there was blind Laurie Prang. And I sent the script to Stan because I just always did as a courtesy. Stan really never gave notes on the script or anything, but I just wanted to keep him aware of what we were doing, particularly the first couple out. And he called me from New York and said, I got the script. I love it. It's great. The fight with a bear is terrific, but it ought to be a robot bear. And I took a deep breath and said, no, Stan, let me explain why. And maybe you've heard this story, but it's fun. I said, an audience will only buy so much. Now, Stan, we're asking them to buy that Bill Bixby metamorphoses into Lou Ferrigno. Now, Stan, that's a really big buy. And as soon as you add a robot bear into it, you're out of the realm of any sort of possible reality, and you'll lose the entire adult audience. And he said, yeah, but you had in the Bionic Woman and the $6 Million Man, you had robotic. I said, yeah, but we were in a world of robotics where my leading lady was partly robot. That's so that it's built in, But no, it wouldn't work. And as a matter of fact, when we were filming New York with Louis running through New York, as we were just seeing the pictures of, when we broke for lunch, I said, Stan's only over on 6th Avenue. That's where his office was. I better go over and just say hi. If he heard I was here in New York and I didn't go to see him. So I went into his office and he heard I was there and he came storming out of his office. He said, "Did you get my letter? Did you get my letter?" I said, "What letter?" He said, "I sent you a special delivery letter." Now, does anybody listening to this know what a special delivery letter is anymore? It's where the postman makes a special trip to bring you the letter. I said, "Well, no, what did you say in your letter?" He said, it said, "You're right, and I was wrong. There should not be any robot bears. That's ridiculous for this kind of thing. What you're doing is great." And I said, "Okay, Stan, I'm sure glad I came over." It was a good day all around.
Yeah, definitely. And, not too many stories where Stan's like, yes, you had that idea a better way than I did. David wanted to know, did you come up with the line as the writer, "You won't like me when I'm angry," which of course is in the original TV movie, but then also in the recap portion at the beginning of every episode?
Yeah, it was in the main title of every episode. Right. And the shot that you saw, the take that you saw in that was take 2, because in take 1, when we shot it the first time, Bix came out of the laboratory shoving Jack Colvin, and he was playing it angry. "Mr. McGee, you don't make me angry, you." And I said, "Wait, cut, stop." And I went up and whispered in his ear, "Bix, it's a joke." And he said, "Ah." And then he went back in and came out and playing and was strong, but then he breaks it off and gets that little magical twinkle that Bix could do so well and does the line. And we know, that he's not joking, but so it played that way. And it's funny because when we were at the premiere of the first Hulk movie, Susie and I were there, and actually at about 4 minutes into the movie, and directed by Ang Lee. Okay, big director whom I'm a huge fan of. I mean, Crouching Tiger, please. But after about 5 minutes, Susie leaned over to me and said, "Is it just me, or is this the worst movie I've ever seen in my life?" And I said, "Well, let's hold on." But it just got worse and worse and worse and worse. Pretty soon, Hulk was going boing, 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 boing. It was like, oh my God. And the only line that got a rise out of the audience was my joke line, "Don't make me angry." So now we're walking out of the theater was trying to sneak out at the end of the screening. Everybody was embarrassed. And one of the guys, I think from Variety, snagged my shoulder and said, "Mr. Johnson, don't make me Ang Lee. You wouldn't like me when I'm Ang Lee." Is that brilliant or what? And it's true. And I also got a call from a writer in New York, cold call, somebody I didn't know. And he said, "Hey, Kenny, you don't know me, but I am one of the 12 guys that worked on the script for the Hulk movie over about 10 years. Gail Ann was trying to get it made for that long." And he said, "I got to tell you, in every screening I have been to in New York, the only line that gets a rise out of the audience is that one." And he said, "I thought you'd like to know that." And I did. It was wonderful to hear, and really sweet of a fellow writer to pick up the phone and say, "Hey, they liked your line better than ours." It was fun.
Well, in the remake or requel, whatever it was, they had was it "You Won't Like Me When I'm Hungry"?
Yeah, we had talked about that before you popped on. So he was learning Portuguese, and then I mean, and that line, sort of the idea, the calm, "You won't like me when I'm angry," that sort of carries through. And one of the things that I think works with the Mark Ruffalo version in the Avengers is this idea that he's like, "Oh, the secret is I'm angry all the time." He just has to.
But that's the one place where I thought Joss went absolutely off the rails and blew the whole thing.
Yeah.
Because as soon as the whole idea, the whole concept of the Hulk from the very beginning had been he has to get angry, and he couldn't just bring it on himself. and nor did he want to, and when I heard that line in the theater, I swear to God, if I'd had a popcorn box in my hand, I would have thrown it at the screen. I thought, oh God. And Stan, you let them do that? Wow. Anyway.
Yeah. And just to circle back earlier, we were talking about Lou. Our friend Daniel Drew mentions he met him at a convention. He was lovely indeed. I think that variations of that you hear all the time. People
all the time.
Obviously, yeah. I have a couple more things that I really want to make sure we get to, but I want to give Michael and Eric a chance before I continue monopolizing the time. I'll ask you first, Michael, as we've continued to talk about the Hulk. Obviously, the character's been around for so long. This iteration goes back 45 or so years. What do you think is the most enduring trait of the Hulk character, the dynamic, the Banner Hulk combination, and how do you think that this original 70s series was able to capture it in maybe a way we haven't seen since, or maybe setting the blueprint for it one way or the other, Michael?
Oh man, I think it showcases how one mistake can change your whole life. And I think that's a big human fear, like ruining your life in a second. Obviously, your take on the Hulk has inspired all of it when it comes to film. I can't really, I guess because I've as long as as Christian said earlier, I'm a little younger than them, but my whole life there has been this show, so I can't really imagine life without this version of the Hulk. I think it was super important and really rare back at that time. Comic books and TV weren't.
Let's take a quick moment and talk about the context. This goes on the air even before the Richard Donner Superman, So, basically superheroes were kind of like the Adam West Batman, where it was goofy, and I think, Wonder Woman to an extent a little bit later that was not as straightforward. But I think having the Hulk, and then they do the great Christopher Reeve Superman movie, the first one in particular, because of those two things. I think people are like, oh yeah, superheroes might be able to work if we do it the right way. What do you think about that era in particular, Kenny? Since I was just a kid, having a birthday party at the movie theater to see Superman, not really thinking about the cultural impact of it.
Well, Dick Donner's work was brilliant. And also he shot so much of the second movie while he was shooting the first movie, and then he ended up getting kicked off. It was like crazy. But and there's a whole director's cut, I think, which is wonderful to go through and listen to, and what they were struggling with. Well, two things. First of all, Stan, Eric said something very similar to what you said. That he was very kind. I was with him on the celebration of his 93rd birthday or something a few years ago. I was looking for a picture that I don't have it handy on this machine. We were down at one of the big theaters in Hollywood where we were all doing a big celebration of Stan, and he brought me up onto the stage with him for quite a bit, and was talking about what I had achieved and how he felt. This is hard for me to say, but that it really started the whole ball rolling on Marvel, because the stuff that had been done previously, not very much, had not worked well. The Hulk, of course, as a comic book, was one of their secondary titles. It was not one that had really broken out yet until the series. And Stan really credited the work that we did on the pilot and the series as really getting what got Marvel started. And that was, when he said that, I was like shaken, because I had never thought of it that way. We were just doing what we could do and to make it the best we could. And for me to make it as humanistic as I could, that's one of the great things that Stan brought to this whole world, of course, is Stan's sense of humanism and character. Peter Parker being, this wimpy little guy, and yet still being able to do all of these things. That's a picture from that night we were there. That's Stan and Louie and me in the dressing room. Thanks for bringing that up. And it was really rewarding. And particularly when I hear it from Stan. There's a photo of me on the wall here at my office from that night, that day we were together on his celebration. And it's one of my favorite pictures that's on the wall over there, because Stan and I were great friends, and from the get-go, we had tried to sell a couple of other things together too, that didn't get made earlier on. But to have that sort of comment made about our work expanding on his work, and how it further expanded all of the Marvel universe, expanded into that, was really something that I'm incredibly honored to have had him say that to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's no shortage of stories of creators who are horrified by the screen versions of the work. I mean, the writer of Mary Poppins, I mean, they made a whole movie about telling the story about how much she hated the Mary Poppins movie. But, and yet I watched the real Mary Poppins movie with my kids, and they still loved it this many years later. So, there's so to have that story that the creators like, I really like what you did with it. In preparing for this, I had only read positive comments from Stan about your version of the Hulk, but I had never heard about the robot bear, and that's my favorite part of the story at this point.
That's good. Well, they're there, and I also, we sometimes should do another session, because I've got that we didn't get to today. I've got a whole a bunch of photos, both of screen grabs from Prometheus, the big epic I did for the opening of season 4 on the Hulk. Because Married was released as a foreign theatrical as well, incidentally, because of the success of the first Hulk movie overseas, and it also became a top-grossing movie overseas. The title was The Bride of the Incredible Hulk, of course. And so for the 4th season opener, I had figured that Warner's or rather Universal would probably want to be able to release another movie overseas. And so I created Prometheus, which was a really epic show, 2-parter to do that I wrote and directed. And we can do a session sometime if you like about that, and with a lot of behind the scenes stuff, and how we used some stock footage in places to make it seem even bigger than it was.
Well, that's a great idea. Maybe we'll do a follow-up specifically on Prometheus. Eric, I want to give you a final thought. And then, like I said, Kenny, I've got 2 big things that I definitely want to talk about. But we'll try to wrap it up. We'll try to keep it under 90 minutes, but I'll do my best. But Eric, I want to give you a moment for any final thoughts you have before I jump into those.
Sure. Well, one, Kenny, I do hope that they paid you at least $10 for the other movie that got released in Europe. I think you by then showed your worth. And Disney might have a check for $17 for you somewhere as well, as they should. A couple of things. I know, by the way, you talked to Christian before about V. And I just would say literally the other day, there's a TV writing class that I teach that actually is a bit of history. It's like kind of walking through from radio up through modern day. And I talk about V, and I was just sharing the story of what it was like as a kid when V came out, and the fact that all of us were like the next day, like if you didn't see V, God help you, because no one was going to talk to you. Like that's all we were talking about. We're all talking about swallowing was it a guinea pig? I'm trying to remember what you swallowed.
It was a guinea pig, yes, and it was the highest rated show NBC had in 2.5 years. It was. In North America, 80 million people tuned in. It was the #1 show in the country.
Wow!
And V is still it was, and I think will probably continue to be always the highest rated work of science fiction in the history of television. And it did have a huge impact, and it's very gratifying. You probably are, or maybe you're not aware. This last June issue of Vanity Fair, there's a big article by Anthony Bresdian about V, about the influence that it has had on the on Q and the whole QAnon world. Yeah, and I've been doing an interview next week, as a matter of fact, here with Hulu. They're doing a documentary about how my lizard people have been co-opted to be elements of QAnon's theories, and who's running, really running the UN, you know.
I definitely don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but that's the sort of the way that people first was aware of Alex Jones was the fact that he's always talking about the lizard people who are behind everything. And I'm like, wait, I've seen that. I think I think we can try to figure out how to beat them. But anyway, Erica,
you can see the June issue of Vanity Fair is online, and you can read the article. It's a great article. I spent about 6 hours and put him in touch with all the other players that were involved, and he did a great job in really putting it all together.
And I'll be happy to share it with my students too, actually, as now you just added to their homework, and I'll blame you specifically. But one thing, so you're talking when you talk about Prometheus, one thing I think it was really apparent even from the pilot, like how effective the use of slow motion was. So I guess a question for the director side of you, and I know obviously Bionic Woman, $6 Million Man also utilized this, but I really was struck by like how effective it was. I mean, that opening scene in the pilot movie when he by the way, years later when I had to fix my first flat tire, which I failed at miserably, I now totally get, of course, how angry I got doing that. And thankfully, two very nice men pulled up and helped me. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that, just the production end of it, because I mean, him in the rain and that first shot you have of him in his full Hulk glory was really terrific, but it's very effective. Even all these years later, now, of course, they would just CG that. But I found that you were able to, on a TV budget, which back then was a very small budget compared to, of course, a movie,
right,
not as much necessarily now. I was just wondering if you could talk a little about sort of pulling off the superhero side of this on a much smaller scale budget.
Well, that's a whole nother show, Eric. and
tell us in 2 seconds too, right?
Yeah, and incidentally, I'd be happy to come sometime and do a guest shot at your class at NIFA if you'd like.
Yes,
well, Christian can put you in touch with me, and as I said, I'll be over there in November and December doing my own classes anyway. But the very shortest version is, I forget what the budget was. I think it was about $1.5 million we had to shoot, which in today's dollars, I don't know off the top of my head, but it would be more like 8 or 9 probably at this point. But still, it was low budget, and we had to do what we had to do, and most all of us. We only built really one set in the movie, and that was the laboratory where he breaks out of the hyperbaric chamber, which was built on stage 28, one of the largest stages in the world. And if you walked off of our stage, you were looking at the original Paris Opera House from The Phantom of the Opera with Lon Chaney. That was still standing on that stage. But we got a good license fee, I guess, from CBS at the time, and Universal kicked in because they were hopeful of getting a series out of it ultimately. And the slow motion, I just decided I wanted to have a little bit of unreality to it. We also would use, when Louis was on screen, a little bit of a different filtration in front of the camera, so that there was just a distance to it, slight unreality, and yet at the same time. The Bionic shows, when they ran in slow motion, it was about 60 or 80 frames a second, which is considerably slower. I just wanted a kiss of slow motion for the Hulk stuff, but it just helps to, I don't know, it just seemed the logical thing to do, to extend some of the action, some of the crash and smash stuff, particularly. And I was working throughout the series with John McPherson, who was a great lighting technician, and along with our gaffer, Jack Schlosser, they were been on more sets than I will ever be on in my life, and done more work than me. But I always try to surround myself with the smartest people I can, and then listen to them, and make sure that everybody's got a voice in what's going on. If the prop guys have got an idea about the lighting, I'm listening to them. If the grips have an idea about the makeup, I'm listening to them. And I always try to pick it. And then I always say that was her idea. That was his idea, because then everybody feels like they can contribute. And it really becomes the collaborative experience that we talk about in movies. And so it was challenging. And yes, shooting. I have a whole session that I do in my class at New York Film Academy about the time eaters, the things that eat up your time. One of them is special effects makeup. One of them is rain. One of them is night. And there in the whole sequence where Bill does Hulk out for the first time, there we are in the rain at night with green makeup on and white eyes, and we had to work it out carefully so that nobody got hurt or burned up with his bombs went off. So it was challenging, but also I wanted the first time he hulked out to be brought on by something mundane. I didn't want him to hulk out because somebody punched him or something. I wanted it to be something that people like you have experienced trying to change a tire. But it had all been building up. And finally, when he bust his knuckle, bang, the white eyes come, and now we're at the point of no return. And it worked really well.
Kenny, before we finish, I want to talk about two people. The first is Jack Colvin. Obviously, Bill Bixby, Lou Ferrigno are such an important part of the show as the two halves of the main character. But Jack McGee, following him around, trying to, catch on to this story. It's so important that he actually sees the Hulk in the movie. He's not just hearing rumors about it. So you understand why he's doing it. The comparison to Jean Valjean, obviously it's sort of this, he's being chased. It's also, you referenced the Fugitive TV series, Detective Gerard following him while he has the quest for the one-armed man. In this case, Banner's trying to find the cure. It works on a weekly series where you are kind of popping into all these different series. So I wanted to see what you think, sort of the idea of that character, the development of it, and what you think of, just what Jack brings to the screen. He's perfect for that era. He's always tossing the cigarette aside. And, I think that character has kind of continued, sort of as not a trope, in a negative sense, but you sort of see iterations of it. I remember in the late 80s when I first read Thomas Harris's Red Dragon, which is the book before Silence of the Lambs. There's a character who works for a newspaper called the National Tattler. His name's Freddie Lowndes. He was played by Philip Seymour Hoffman in the more recent movie, Stephen Lang in the earlier one. And it's kind of the same idea. Nosy reporter who is just sort of following the story around. Fortunately for Jack McGee, he doesn't meet the kind of ending that the character in Red Dragon does. But talk a little bit about the importance of having him as that through line throughout the series and Jack just bringing it to the screen.
Yeah, I can be very quick, and I need to be because I've got to step away pretty quick here. But sure. No, Jack was a contract player at Universal. And when they brought him in to me, I think Jack was the only person I read for it. As soon as he came in and we read together, I said, "Oh yeah, this is the guy." And because he had substance. Jack was also a tremendous acting coach, incidentally, long career as an acting coach and an acting teacher. And so he brought just great professional chops to it. And I've always been intrigued by the characters who would write for the National Enquirer. And that would seem to me to be the obvious kind of guy that would come up with a word like Hulk, which we had it appear on the newspaper at the end of the pilot. So it couldn't be a cop that was after him. So as in the Javert situation. And I never really saw the Fugitive as a television series. I was in college at the time and too busy. So it really was based more on Jean Valjean and Javert. But I love that obsession that Javert had, and the fact that Jack that his character inadvertently caused the death of the lady and blew up the lab because he was snooping and turned over a bucket of something that blew up. It was something a lot of people have come back to me and say he should have been found out about. Well, doesn't matter. But what he brought as an actor was just a full range of work, and he also directed, I think, a couple of episodes for us too. And we found ways to write shows that were really about him and about his involvement. And certainly in Prometheus, he's all the way through it. And we wanted to give him a lot more. We realized we had such a sterling actor in Jack Colvin that we wanted to give him as much service as we could as a character, so that he was really involved as much as possible, because he added an extra dimension and really gave us an opportunity to do other scenes, and also P.S. some scenes without Bix or Lou in it, so that Bix wouldn't have to be working all day every single day. That's a factor that's really important when you're doing episodic television. But I have really enjoyed this, guys, and as I said, I'd be happy to come back sometime and talk about Prometheus. Eric, I'm happy to visit you at NIFA sometime, and thanks for you being so interested, and caring so much about it. That's obviously the greatest reward anybody can get when they create a project like this. That it sticks, and it still speaks to people the same today as it did back then originally, and that's just so gratifying. And I think that what we tried to do more than anything else was just fill it with humanism, which is the thing that I always lean on my film students about. When you're trying to decide what to bring into your movie, think about, choose wisely.
Yes, and as we let you go, I want to make sure to shout out Joe Harnell, who did the music on the show, and of course the Lonely Man theme, which because of YouTube regulations we cannot play as we send you off. But I would love to have you walk up the stairs as we play it. But we can't do it. We'll get the video struck. But we'll definitely do it again, and we'll talk more about sort of what he brought to it. KennethJohnson.us and the Sherlock Holmes book. I'm sorry, I don't have the title in my head. Make sure to hold it up for everyone. That's the one. Homecoming.
Homecoming. Get it?
Yeah. Kenny, thank you so much. Please feel free to run off. I'll let our audience know some programming notes. But thank you so much. We will definitely talk again. I'll send you an email sometime soon. We'll figure out what we do next. But that's great. Kenny Johnson, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Christian. Take care.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being on and so generous with his time. And that's the problem when you save one of the questions you really want to ask for the end. You don't really get to ask it. But I did want to end on the music, But then
ask Michael though
about the scoring of the music.
Yeah,
and look, it was a lot of fun to go back, and there are many episodes of this show that I have not seen. And there's some that I kind of remember when it ended up on the Sci-Fi Channel in the early 90s. That's where I probably saw the most of it. And it's kind of when you realize in your head is like, oh man, they only do Hulk stuff for a few minutes each episode, but probably because of the TV budget. But I love the idea of having him back on just in general. And talking about some of the specifics, maybe the married episode that he was talking about and the Prometheus. Maybe we do that as a twofer.
Sure.
I didn't know until we started talking right before the show that he had brought visual aids, that he had these great pictures of them playing a joke on him on the set. And it's wonderful to get a chance to talk to Kenny. And as I mentioned at the top of the show, I did talk to him for even longer than this. I talked to him for an hour and 45 minutes for Geekscape about V back in May, I think. Actually, it was April. And there's a video of that right here on the Geekscape channel. And then also it was on the audio feed right around that time, celebrating the 40th anniversary of V, which I think that if nothing else, watching V and the Incredible Hulk, you get a real sense for the fashions of a bygone era. Michael, has any of David Banner's wardrobe inspired any possible denim cosplay for somewhere in the future, perhaps wandering from town to town trying to get a job as a ranch hand?
I love like a ripped capri dress pant.
Yeah.
So.
I had no idea until we started talking that he didn't even see the Ed Norton Hulk. That's why I told him, I'm like, well, they kind of shout you out in it, but he's like, yeah, I wasn't interested.
I'm far too conceited to let anything like that go. If I had created like the basis of something, I would there are still celebrities that I worked for that I don't really, care much about, that I still follow everything they do.
Sure.
Is
Yes.
Christian one of them?
Yes, but he said celebrities. And yes, I'm not going to name any names, but someone you worked for is always very interesting, an interesting follow.
Well, that person I do love, and I follow with genuine interest. But there's some that I just keep tabs on.
Is it Kanye West?
No. He
Wow,
said
you still love him?
No,
Jeez.
and the interesting
he
thing
went
about
to my
Kenny,
college, by the way.
The interesting thing about the interesting thing about Kenny when I talked to him about V is that there's a well-known sequel miniseries called V: The Final Battle, and then a TV series. He is absolutely not involved with either of those, and that's a great story. For anybody interested in filmmaking, talking about writing 40 pages for the Hulk movie in a day, that's crazy. And the development process, how quickly V got on the air, I believe that is also an example where they shot white pages, and it's crazy to think about how little rewriting might have gone on at the time. But anyway, we could recap what everybody just saw, but we've already gone so long today. And we will definitely have Kenny back sometime in the near future. I do want to provide a programming note for everyone, because our next show will not be next Wednesday at this time. It will be next Friday at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, 2 Central, so that we can recap episode 1 of season 2 of Loki, which will be premiering, I guess, Thursday evening. So we'll be doing that Friday afternoon, and our show's going to live on Friday for a little while. I will let you know, though, we do also have a special episode that'll pop up during the run of Loki. We actually have a couple of specials that I'll let you guys know more about if you tune in next week. But make sure you join us Friday. And Kemi Egan knows you so well, Michael. Michael's favorite show is next week, the return of Loki. And yes, so make sure you find us right here on Geekscape, Friday, noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. Do you have any other final thoughts, final words, guys? I don't want to. I know that Kenny is a great interview, but he's got so many stories to tell. I try to stay out of the way, but I apologize if I didn't include you guys as much as I could have. It's always tough to kind of navigate those conversations, but I always find them really rewarding.
I'm enjoying this on-air apology, by the way. I think I just
keep going.
Yeah, no, Christian. I'd like to apologize to my wife Nancy for the Jessica Hahn bathtub incident.
All right. Well, you know what? We got to cancel the show because Daniel Drew won't be there. He's going to be out of town for a wedding. You know what?
No. They're going to get divorced anyway. Just come. No.
Oh no, that's terrible. But yeah,
I said it.
Really,
I said I ain't
really
taking it
funny.
Anyway,
well, it's not his wedding, so I think it's fine.
No, I know. If it was his wedding, I'd say God bless, Mazel Tov. I would do a little dance. No. Dan, you come to the thing. Or bring them. Well, bring them. We'll marry them.
We'll see everybody Friday afternoon, October 6th. And huge thank you to Kenny Johnson and everybody. Check out the Incredible Hulk TV series. Probably getting DVDs and Blu-rays might actually be the easiest thing at this point because, boy, it's not streaming the way that I thought it was. But it's out there. You can find
most of it's out there. No, most of it's on Amazon Prime. Actually, I found a lot of it. But weirdly enough, like they would be numbered differently than the IMDb. So it was a whole thing. But Christian, thank you for bringing him. It was a pleasure chatting with him. And
I knew I was like, I was already 45 minutes into the conversation about V, and I'm like, man, I can't ask him about the Hulk. I got to save that for another time because it was just too much. And don't worry, Daniel is going to make sure to tell the bride and groom that at Count Eric Conner thinks that it will never last. But what will continue to last is this show. We will see you on Friday. And until the next time, as the great Stan Lee would say, Excelsior!